The silence after the storm felt endless. The stars looked peaceful from the outside, but for the crew trapped inside the drifting ship, space had turned into a cold prison. The engines were dead. The power was fading. Every light that once filled the corridors now flickered weakly, giving off just enough glow to remind them they were still alive. At least for now. It had happened so suddenly. One moment they were moving through open space, collecting readings from a quiet region near a forgotten system. The next, the sensors screamed. Something massive. Debris from an old battle or maybe a rogue asteroid slammed into the side of their vessel. The alarms had echoed like thunder in a metal cage. Then came darkness. When they finally managed to stabilize the ship, the damage was far worse than anyone expected. The communication array was gone, torn apart in the collision. The engines had taken a direct hit. The emergency systems were working, but barely. And the nearest outpost was months away, even at full speed. Days passed. They tried everything they could. Panels were rewired. Power cells were moved from one system to another, just to keep life support running. They sent out distress signals on every known frequency, hoping someone, anyone, would hear. But space stayed silent. There's a special kind of silence in deep space, one that no sound can break. It isn't like quiet rooms or empty fields on planets. It's heavier, like it presses on your thoughts until you start to hear your own heartbeat too clearly. That's what it felt like for them, the weight of nothing pressing in from every direction. They floated near the border of an old, restricted zone. That part of space wasn't marked on many maps anymore. Some said it was cursed. Others said it was just forgotten. Whatever the truth was, no one came there anymore. That meant no rescue, no ships passing by, no hope of being found. Inside, the crew tried to keep a routine. They rationed their food and water carefully, turning every meal into a quiet ceremony of survival. They took shifts maintaining what little power remained, but even small tasks started to feel meaningless after a while. The ship had stopped moving, but time hadn't. Every day felt a little shorter, a little colder. One of them kept recording logs, even when it became clear that no one might ever hear them. Maybe it was a way to stay sane, to hold on to something human or whatever their version of human was. The recordings weren't about technical details anymore. They talked about the stars outside the viewport, about memories of home, about promises left unfinished. Sometimes when they gathered near the main deck window, they would watch the stars drift slowly past. It was beautiful in a painful way. They used to think space was full of wonder, something pure and infinite. Now it felt like a graveyard, endless, quiet, indifferent. The cold was getting worse. The backup power cells were almost empty, and the heating system was shutting down. Breath began to fog inside the ship. They wrapped themselves in thermal sheets, speaking less each day, saving energy even in conversation. Hope was a resource too, and it was running out faster than the air. One of them started drawing on the walls with a broken piece of a control pad. Small lines, symbols, maybe prayers, maybe just a record that they had existed. Another tried to fix the antenna again, working until their hands were too numb to hold the tools. But there was no signal, only static. The stars didn't move. That was the cruel part. The galaxy looked the same every night, glowing softly through the glass. But no matter how much it sparkled, it never reached them. They were too far, too alone. Eventually, the ship's artificial gravity weakened and objects started floating gently. The sound of clinking metal echoed whenever a tool or piece of gear drifted into a wall. The hum of the life support became a whisper, then a faint buzz. They started to record farewell messages, short, quiet goodbyes. Not for glory, not for history, but because it felt right to say something before the silence took everything. They didn't talk about fear anymore. They talked about light, about the color of their home sky, about the sound of rain. In one of the final recordings, the captain's voice was tired, but calm. They spoke slowly, as if choosing every word mattered. If anyone finds this, they said, we tried. We kept trying until the end. Tell whoever listens that we believed someone would come. Maybe not for us, but someday, for someone else. Then the recording ended. The crew began to drift between wakefulness and sleep. Energy levels fell. Some of them stayed in their seats, staring out into the blackness. Others found corners and sat in silence, listening to the ship creak. The air felt heavier with each passing hour. Outside, the ship looked like a ghost, half its panels torn, lights dimmed to tiny dots, hull coated in frost. To any distant observer, it would seem lifeless, and in a way it was, but deep inside, one heartbeat still pulsed, faint but steady. Time lost meaning. It could have been days or weeks. The ship rotated slowly, catching faint light from a distant star every few hours. The broken hull reflected that light like a dying ember. Then the silence changed. Not broken, not yet, but disturbed. A faint tremor ran through the hull like something had brushed against it. One of the still-functioning monitors blinked once, then again. The last surviving crew member opened their eyes, unsure if it was real or a dream. There was a sound, a faint rhythmic pulse on the sensors. Too regular to be natural. Too close to ignore. Weak hands reached for the console. The data flickered, unreadable, but something was there. Something was moving toward them. For a long moment they just stared, afraid to believe. The mind plays tricks when it's desperate. But the signal grew stronger. A new echo filled the room, a low vibration that didn't come from their ship. Through the frost-covered viewport, a shadow appeared, distant at first, then slowly taking shape. It wasn't a star or debris. It moved with purpose, cutting through the darkness like a silent guardian. The survivor blinked hard, wiping away the thin layer of ice from the glass. The shape became clearer, sleek, metallic, and bright lights, white and blue, shone from its hull. They tried to call out, but their voice barely worked. Still, they whispered the only word that came to mind. Someone's here. The shadow grew larger until it filled the view entirely. The light spread across the ruined bridge, warm and alive. For the first time in what felt like forever, the darkness wasn't complete anymore. Then came a sound, the first real sound they'd heard in weeks. A transmission ping, weak but unmistakable. It wasn't in their language, but the tone carried something universal. Concern. The frozen figure on the floor smiled faintly, realizing what was happening. The ship outside wasn't alien. It wasn't one of the Empire's patrols. The markings on the hull were old, worn by travel, but still recognizable. It was human, and it had found them. The quiet of deep space, that cold, endless silence that had swallowed their hope, was finally broken. The forgotten ship, once drifting toward oblivion, now floated in the glow of human light. The sensors blinked one last time before shutting down completely, their purpose finally fulfilled. Outside, the human vessel moved closer, its docking lights cutting through the frost and shadow. Inside, the survivor's heartbeat slowed, not from fear this time, but from relief. Space remained silent, but it was no longer empty. Someone had come. Far away from the drifting alien ship, Earth was alive with its usual noise. Cities glowed, oceans moved, and in quiet rooms filled with machines and cables, people worked night shifts no one ever noticed. In one of those quiet rooms sat a young technician, half asleep at their station. It was supposed to be a calm night. Nothing unusual ever came through the deep space receivers this far from the main channels. Most of what they caught were echoes, old satellite signals, bits of cosmic background noise, and random bursts of radiation that meant nothing. But then something different appeared on the screen. It wasn't strong. In fact, it was barely visible, just a faint pulse hidden under layers of static. At first, the technician thought it was interference. They were about to clear the data when the pulse repeated. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm, like a heartbeat. Curious, they ran it through a basic filter. The signal grew a little clearer, though still faint and broken. It didn't match any known Earth transmission pattern. It wasn't military, civilian, or automated. It was something else. The technician leaned closer, replaying it over and over until a few fragments of sound became recognizable, short bursts that almost sounded like a voice. They froze. For a moment, they just listened, heart pounding. The sound wasn't human, not exactly, but it carried emotion, fear, exhaustion, desperation. Someone somewhere was calling out for help. The technician sent the data to the upper desk for review. The senior analysts responded slowly, as they always did. They ran it through modern decoders, linguistic models, and advanced scanners. But all they got was a garbled mess. Most dismissed it. Probably a ghost signal, someone said. Old transmission bouncing off debris. But the technician wasn't convinced. Something about it felt real. So they dug deeper, searching through older human tools, software and filters from the early days of space exploration, The kind humans once used when technology wasn't perfect, but instincts were sharper. The moment they processed it with that older code, something changed. The background noise thinned out, and words started to form, fragmented, broken, but recognizable. It was a distress call. The words repeated at uneven intervals, barely audible but clear enough to send a chill down their spine. Someone out there was begging for rescue. The language was strange, full of sounds no human could make. But mixed within it were coordinates, numerical patterns that followed a structure humans could read. They stared at the numbers, feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread. The coordinates pointed to a region deep beyond the charted lanes, a place no active mission had visited for decades. It wasn't just distant, it was unreachable by ordinary means. They checked the maps twice. That part of the galaxy had been labeled as unreliable zone due to magnetic storms and ancient wreckage fields. No one went there. Even automated drones avoided it. To everyone else, it was dead space. But someone was there now, and they were still alive enough to send a call. The technician reported the finding again, this time bypassing the usual chain. Within hours, a small command team assembled. Screens filled the dark room as they analyzed the signal. It didn't take long for arguments to start. Some said it was a hoax or an echo from a long-destroyed craft. Others believed it could be a trap, a remnant of old wars between species. A few, though, stayed silent, staring at the data in awe, because if the signal was genuine, then someone had survived where no one should have. Humanity had a long memory when it came to distress calls. Every generation had stories of lost explorers, silent stations, and faint beacons found decades too late. But this was different. This was a call coming from beyond the line everyone swore no living being could cross. News of the discovery didn't stay contained for long. Word spread quietly through back channels, scientists talking in hushed tones, pilots whispering in bars near the orbital docks, captains glancing at old maps with that dangerous look in their eyes. Curiosity. In a small control room, a group of officers met behind closed doors. They debated for hours whether to send a rescue mission. On one hand, the risk was immense. No ship had ever returned from that region. On the other hand, the message was clear enough to prove that someone was there. One voice in the room said something simple but powerful. If we don't answer, who will? That question lingered in the air. No one had a good reply. Officially, the mission wasn't approved. The resources were too limited and the route too unpredictable. The bureaucrats decided it would be better to mark the signal as an anomaly and move on. After all, space was full of ghosts, but humans were never good at ignoring cries for help, especially when they came from the dark. In one of the orbital hangars, a small crew began to talk quietly among themselves. They weren't heroes or soldiers, just people who had spent their lives in the stars. They'd all seen too much to believe in luck, but not enough to stop believing in purpose. The moment they heard about the forgotten coordinates, something in them stirred. They met in secret, away from the officials and the noise. One of them brought an old star map, the kind printed on real paper, a reminder of when space exploration still felt personal. They laid it out across a metal table, tracing the line of the signal, connecting the dots. The path led straight into the sector the galaxy had long abandoned. It wasn't a smart idea. Everyone knew that. The magnetic fields there could scramble navigation. The gravitational waves could tear smaller ships apart. But for the ones planning this, danger wasn't new. What bothered them more was the thought of doing nothing. For days they prepared quietly. Spare parts, fuel cells, extra oxygen tanks. Everything was gathered without official clearance. The hangar crew helped too, pretending not to notice what was happening. They understood the unwritten rule of space travel. When someone's lost, you go. Back at the listening station, the technician kept monitoring the signal. Every few hours, the transmission would fade, then return weaker than before. Time was running out for whoever was sending it. The coordinates didn't change, but the background noise grew louder, like the storm around the ship was getting worse. Finally, the signal stopped. The technician stared at the empty line on the screen, heart sinking. The silence felt unbearable. They whispered to themselves, "Please, not now." But deep down, they knew the truth. The ship out there might have finally gone dark. Still, the coordinates were already recorded. Even if the message was gone, the location remained. It was all the proof anyone needed. And somewhere above the planet, in the cold glow of the docks, a single human vessel was preparing to launch. It wasn't large or new, but its engines were strong. And its crew was made of people who didn't wait for permission to do the right thing. They didn't know what they would find out there: wreckage, silence, or survivors. But it didn't matter. For them, it was about more than just rescue. It was about what it meant to be human, to hear a voice calling for help and to answer, even when the odds said not to. The technician watched from their screen as the small vessel's ID tag appeared on the radar for the last time before it left orbit. They didn't know the crew personally, but they smiled anyway. "Good luck," they whispered. "Bring them home." The stars outside Earth's atmosphere burned softly, indifferent to the small ship cutting through their light. The journey ahead would be long, dangerous, and uncertain. But for now there was hope again, a tiny spark born from a fading signal and a choice to act. The forgotten coordinates were no longer forgotten. They were now a destination, and somewhere far beyond the reach of most maps, in the cold silence of space, the lost ship still drifted. Its lights were dim, its systems almost dead. But if someone looked closely, they would have seen a faint reflection move across the hull, a glimmer of something new approaching. It wasn't just the echo of light anymore. It was the first trace of humanity coming for them. The hangar was quiet that night, far quieter than usual. Rows of ships rested under dim lights, their metal shells glowing faintly in the dark. Among them stood one vessel, smaller, older, and patched from years of travel. It wasn't built for war or exploration anymore. It was just a workhorse meant for cargo runs and repairs. But that night, it was being prepared for something far greater. The crew moved quietly, careful not to draw attention. They loaded extra fuel, oxygen tanks, and food supplies, pretending it was just another maintenance run. But everyone who helped knew what was really happening. The ship wasn't heading to any registered destination. It was going beyond the maps toward the coordinates pulled from that faint, almost forgotten distress signal. There were no official approvals, no speeches, no media coverage. Just a few people driven by something stronger than orders: conscience. As the engines warmed, a low hum filled the air. One of the engineers checked the stabilizers and whispered, "She's old, but she'll make it." Another smiled faintly, replying, "We just need her to make it there." For a brief moment, the hangar doors opened, revealing the endless black sky beyond. The stars shone like tiny fires, each one a reminder of how small they were and how far they were about to go. The ship lifted off, slow and steady, engines glowing brighter as it broke through the upper atmosphere. From the ground, it looked like a streak of silver vanishing into the night. Once it was free of Earth's gravity, the silence of space wrapped around it completely. Inside, the crew sat in their stations, surrounded by blinking lights and old screens that flickered slightly with each system check. There was tension in the air, but also something else: purpose. No one spoke much in the first few hours. They all knew the risks. The region they were heading toward wasn't just far, it was unstable. Old navigation systems couldn't handle the gravitational storms there. Communication would be almost impossible once they crossed a certain point. Still, no one turned back. As the ship moved deeper into space, the stars around them began to change. Familiar constellations disappeared, replaced by strange clusters of light. They passed the last known relay beacon and watched its signal fade behind them. From that moment on, they were alone. The pilot adjusted the controls carefully. Every small movement mattered now. They had to follow the coordinates exactly, or they'd drift into fields of debris left from ancient battles long forgotten. The sensors picked up ghost signals, old transmissions bouncing endlessly between broken satellites and lost ships. Some of the messages were hundreds of years old, repeating fragments of words no one remembered. One of the crew members turned the volume down. "Too many voices," they said quietly. "Let's focus on ours." They traveled for days, cutting through regions where space itself seemed twisted. Static danced across the radar, and lights flickered without warning. The crew took turns watching the instruments and checking the engines, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that they were moving through the ruins of something much older than themselves. During the long hours between systems checks, they talked about why they were doing this. Not everyone agreed at first. Some believed they might be chasing a ghost signal, that by the time they arrived, nothing would be left to save. But others argued that even if there was just one life out there, it was worth the risk. One of them said softly, "If we were the ones stranded out there, wouldn't we want someone to try?" That ended the discussion. No one needed to say more. When they finally reached the edge of the restricted sector, the view changed completely. The stars grew fewer and the light dimmed. Ahead of them stretched a vast field of debris, metal shards, broken ships, and pieces of what once might have been stations or colonies. It looked like a graveyard floating in the dark. The ship slowed down, its engines humming softly as they navigated through the wreckage. Pieces of metal drifted silently past, spinning gently. Some were marked with symbols from species long extinct. Others still had names printed on them, faded and unreadable. For the first time since leaving Earth, the crew felt the weight of fear. This wasn't just space, and it was a place where countless others had vanished. The instruments began to malfunction, overwhelmed by the magnetic fields. Navigation lines flickered and disappeared. Still, the pilot pressed on. The coordinates from the distress call were close now. Only a few more hours. The crew adjusted power distribution, making sure the engines wouldn't overheat. The sound of the hull creaking under pressure echoed through the corridors. It reminded everyone how fragile their ship really was. They passed through a cloud of dust and small debris, like ashes floating through space. When it cleared, something massive appeared in the distance. At first it looked like a shadow, a dark shape barely visible against the stars. But as they got closer, it became clear. It was a ship, larger than theirs by far, but lifeless. Its hull was torn open on one side. Lights were out. No movement, just silence. They slowed to a stop, staring in awe. The coordinates matched exactly. This was the source of the signal. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the faint hum of the life support. Finally, the communications officer whispered, "Is anyone still alive in there?" They scanned for life signs, for energy readings, anything that might suggest movement. For minutes, there was nothing. Then, faintly, a weak signal appeared on the monitor. It wasn't a distress call this time. It was something else. A steady pulse, a heartbeat signal. The crew exchanged looks. That was enough. The pilot aligned the ship for docking. The metal arms extended slowly, connecting with the larger vessel's airlock. The sound of metal clamping against metal echoed like thunder in the silence. Once the seals were confirmed, they suited up. The air in the docking corridor was cold and thin. The door opened with a long, heavy hiss, revealing a dark passage inside. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, beams of light sweeping across walls covered in frost. The air was still. Pieces of debris floated gently, bumping into their suits. They moved carefully, checking corners, following the faint energy readings deeper into the ship. Every room told a story. Burned-out control panels, empty food containers, tools left mid-repair. It felt like the crew here had fought until the very end. Then they found the main deck. Frozen bodies floated gently in the air, preserved by the cold. Some were still strapped into their seats. The sight was quiet and heavy. No one spoke. The humans had seen loss before, but this felt different. These people weren't enemies or strangers. They were explorers like them, beings who had believed in discovery now gone. They continued deeper, following the last weak energy signature. It led them to the medical bay. Inside, a single pod still glowed faintly. Its power was nearly gone, but the life readings were real. Someone was still alive. The humans worked quickly. They connected portable power cells to the pod, stabilizing its systems. The frost on the glass began to melt, revealing the shape of an alien being inside. Weak, motionless, but breathing. The room filled with a soft mechanical hum as life support restarted. The humans watched in silence, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had found them. After weeks of travel, after crossing through the most dangerous region of space, after risking everything without permission or reward, they had reached the lost ship and saved a life. The leader of the human crew looked through the glass, voice quiet but firm. "We got you," they whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Outside, their own ship's beacon began to flash across the wreckage, sending a new signal into the void, a message stronger than any words. Help had arrived, and for the first time in that dark corner of space, something stirred. Not just life, but hope. The docking clamps groaned softly as the human ship held its position against the massive, wounded vessel. For a moment, everything was still. The only sound inside their cabin was the quiet hum of machinery and the rhythmic thump of heartbeats through the suits. No one spoke. They just stared through the viewing screen at the alien ship that floated before them. Silent, dark, and broken. It was like looking at the skeleton of something that once lived and breathed. The hull was torn open on one side. Twisted metal, frozen mid-bend like the ribs of a fallen giant. Shards of glass drifted near its windows. Faint light from a distant star passed through the gaps, making the wreck shimmer in cold silver tones. The humans watched in awe. There was sadness in their eyes, but also determination. They hadn't come this far to just look at ruins. After checking the oxygen seals twice, the team stepped into the airlock. The door opened with a heavy hiss. Cold air poured in like mist, filling their helmets with a faint static hum. The silence beyond was almost too much. It swallowed even their breathing sounds. Their flashlights cut thin white lines through the dark corridor. Dust particles floated slowly in the air, catching the light like tiny falling stars. Every step they took echoed faintly, followed by the soft sound of their boots clinking on metal. They passed through narrow halls lined with strange symbols and panels. Some panels still flickered weakly, showing dying lights, like the ship was trying to stay alive but didn't have the strength anymore. Looks like they fought hard to keep this place running. One of them whispered over the comms. The others nodded. In a nearby chamber, they found the remains of control consoles burned, broken, and melted together. The smell of scorched metal still lingered even after all that time. One console had handprints frozen in frost near it, like someone had tried to fix it in their final moments. The deeper they went, the more signs of struggle they found. Broken equipment, emergency rations left half-eaten, air filters torn apart for parts. It told a story without words. A crew that had fought until their last breath, trying everything to survive. One of the humans paused near a bulkhead door. Faint scratches marked the wall beside it, lines drawn over and over again. It wasn't decoration, it was counting. Days, maybe weeks. A record of time made by someone who didn't want to be forgotten. The discovery hit them hard. They all stood there for a moment, quiet, letting the reality sink in. These weren't just strangers, they were explorers, people who had dreams, who had trusted the stars like humans once did. Finally, they reached the central control room. The wide window there was shattered, leaving a clear view of the void outside. Stars drifted silently beyond the glass. Several chairs were still occupied. Frozen figures, their bodies preserved by the cold vacuum that had leaked in. One of the humans switched off their flashlight for a moment, and the room filled with faint blue light from the stars. They never gave up, someone said softly. They stayed until the end. But this wasn't the end for everyone. Their scanners still showed a faint pulse deeper inside the ship, a weak but steady energy source. It came from the medical bay. They followed the signal through another corridor, their lights cutting through the dust-filled dark. The air grew colder. Every sound became sharper, every movement slower. They reached a heavy door marked with foreign symbols. It barely opened, stuck halfway from lack of power. Together, they forced it open just enough to slip inside. The medical bay was small and filled with shadow. Most of the pods were dark and cracked, but in the far corner, one pod still glowed faintly. A pale light fighting against the darkness. Frost covered the glass, hiding whatever was inside. The crew gathered around it, hearts pounding. They checked the life readings on their scanners, one faint heartbeat still there. Without wasting time, they unpacked portable power cells and connected them to the pod. Sparks flew as old wires came alive again. The hum of energy filled the room. Slowly, the frost on the glass began to melt. Inside lay a being unlike anything most of them had seen before. Tall, delicate, covered in thin, pale skin, with faint traces of bioluminescence. It looked peaceful, almost asleep. Its chest rose and fell faintly with shallow breaths. For a long moment, the humans said nothing. They just stood there, staring through the glass, realizing what they had done. Against every odd, they had found someone still alive. The medic checked the readings again and nodded. Still breathing, they said quietly. We can bring them back. They stabilized the pod and transferred it to the human ship. Every movement was careful, almost sacred. No one rushed. They knew they were carrying something precious, proof that life still clung to hope, even in the darkest corners of space. Once aboard their own vessel, they sealed the doors and began the revival process. The systems hissed softly as warm air filled the pod. The frozen skin of the alien being began to regain color. Tiny movements flickered beneath its closed eyes. The crew gathered around, waiting, barely daring to breathe. Hours passed in silence. Then finally the being's hand twitched. Its eyes opened slowly. Bright, strange eyes filled with confusion and fear. At first it didn't move. It just stared, trying to make sense of the lights, the shapes, the unfamiliar faces around it. One of the humans gently raised a hand, a gesture of peace. No words, just calm. The alien blinked and slowly relaxed. They couldn't speak the same language, but something about the moment didn't need translation. It was the oldest message in the universe. You're safe now. The medic handed over a small container of water, placing it within reach. The alien hesitated, then reached for it with trembling fingers. The act was simple, but it broke the invisible wall between them. As the hours passed, the alien grew stronger. They monitored its vitals, repaired its breathing tube, and made sure the temperature was stable. It tried to speak a few times, but the words were soft and unfamiliar, more like music than speech. Still, there was understanding in their eyes, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. When it realized who had saved it, something changed. Its gaze lingered on the humans' faces, scanning the small details, their tired eyes, the scratches on their helmets, the dirt on their uniforms. These weren't machines or soldiers. They were people who had risked everything to help a stranger. One of the humans smiled softly and said, "We heard you. We came as fast as we could." Of course, the alien didn't understand the words, but it seemed to understand the tone, the kindness, the honesty. A few hours later, the crew gathered around the viewing window again. Outside, the alien ship drifted silently behind them. It looked like a monument now, floating peacefully after all its pain. The humans decided to leave a beacon near it, a small light carrying the coordinates and message. Rescue completed. Survivors found. It would stay there, shining faintly in the dark, a mark of remembrance and hope. Before they undocked, the alien looked through the window at its ship one last time. Even without understanding the details, the humans could feel the weight of that look. It wasn't just sorrow, it was goodbye. Then as their engines fired up, the wreck faded slowly behind them, becoming just another shadow among the stars. Inside, the atmosphere changed. The tension that had followed them since the beginning started to ease. There were smiles again, quiet ones filled with pride and relief. They didn't talk about what would happen next. They didn't think about the rules they'd broken or the orders they'd ignored. All that mattered was that someone had been saved. The medic sat near the pod, keeping watch. The alien had fallen asleep again, breathing softly. Its chest rose and fell in rhythm with the soft hum of the ship's engine. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly ahead of them, cold, vast, and silent. But for the first time in a long while, the humans didn't feel small or alone. They had done something that no approval or command could ever measure. They had proven, once again, what humanity was made of. And as the human ship moved away from the wreckage, a single thought echoed quietly through every heart aboard. Even in the darkest corners of space, kindness still finds a way. The first sound the alien heard after waking again was soft humming, the rhythm of an engine running steady and calm. It was gentle, almost like a heartbeat. For a moment, it didn't move. It just listened. The sound was warm, steady, alive. Then slowly it opened its eyes. The room was small, bright and strange. Smooth walls glowed faintly with white light. A low beeping came from a screen nearby. It blinked several times, trying to remember what had happened. The last memories were chaos, alarms screaming, lights flickering, the cold rushing in as the ship broke apart. Then darkness. Now everything was different. The air was warm. The smell was clean, full of metal and something new, something alive. It turned its head slightly and saw faces, human faces. They were watching quietly, standing a few steps away. Their suits were off now, replaced by simple uniforms. Their eyes showed a mix of curiosity and concern. None of them spoke for a while. They just looked at each other, two worlds meeting in silence. Finally, One of the humans stepped closer and offered a calm smile. They spoke softly, words slow and careful. The alien didn't understand, but the tone was soothing. It wasn't the tone of a commander or a threat. It was the tone of someone saying, "You're safe." The alien blinked, its breathing steadying. It tried to speak, but its throat ached. The sound that came out was broken, like a whisper of wind over stone. The human raised a hand gently, signaling it to rest. Then they pressed a few buttons on the console, and warm air filled the room again. The alien closed its eyes briefly, letting the warmth sink into its bones. It had never felt anything like it, safety in a place so far from home. Hours passed before it tried to sit up. The humans were ready. They helped slowly, adjusting the bed and supporting its back. The alien's movements were weak but steady. Its eyes darted around the room, landing on every strange detail. The screens, the controls, the glowing panels. Everything looked so different. The humans handed over a small transparent cup filled with clear liquid. The alien hesitated. Water. It was universal, but still the gesture made it pause. When one of the humans took a sip first, smiling reassuringly, the alien followed, drinking slowly. The cool taste was familiar. It was the first real comfort in a long, long time. The silence between them began to soften. The alien looked around again and saw a small blue symbol on one wall, an emblem of Earth. It didn't know what it meant yet, but something about it felt strong. The humans started setting up a small device near the bed, a language translator. It wasn't perfect, but it could match basic sound patterns and convert them into visuals. It was humanity's way of reaching across the gap. When the device turned on, the alien tilted its head, curious. The humans spoke a few simple words. Hello, safe. Friend. After a few tries, the device repeated the alien's sounds back, adjusting the tones. It took time, but slowly, they began to understand one another. Small steps, simple meanings. The alien finally whispered through the translator. You came. The human nodded. We heard a signal. We came. A long pause followed. The alien's eyes filled with something deep, half gratitude, half disbelief. No one comes, it said softly. We were forgotten. The humans didn't know what to say. The room fell quiet again, the only sound the hum of the ship's engine. Then one of them said gently, Not forgotten. Not anymore. The alien stared at them for a long moment, then looked down, hands trembling slightly. It remembered the faces of its own crew, the long days without hope, the cold silence that had wrapped around their ship like a coffin. It had accepted death. But somehow, against all reason, life had come back in the form of strangers, humans. In the next days, the alien grew stronger. The humans kept close but respectful, never overwhelming it. They brought food that matched its biology after testing samples, and adjusted the air composition in the room to help it breathe easier. Slowly, color returned to its skin, and its voice grew clearer. Every now and then, it would try to stand and look out through the viewing port. The sight of space, the endless stars, filled it with both awe and sorrow. Somewhere out there was the memory of its home, lost to time and distance. One night it asked through the translator, Where are we going? Back to the colony, the human captain answered. We'll find a safe place for you. Then, maybe we'll help you find your world again. The alien tilted its head. Why? You owe me nothing. The captain smiled faintly. Maybe not, but helping is what we do. Those words stayed in the alien's mind. Helping is what we do. It repeated them quietly, almost like a prayer. As time went on, the alien began to understand more of their ways. It watched how the humans worked together, fixing things, sharing meals, laughing softly during rest hours. They seemed fragile compared to most species it had known, small, soft-skinned, always cautious. Yet there was something unbreakable in them. When they spoke to each other, their voices carried warmth even in exhaustion. When they looked at the stars, their eyes still carried wonder, not fear. One afternoon, as they passed near a nebula, the alien stood by the window, mesmerized by the shifting colors. The human medic came and stood beside it. "Beautiful, isn't it?" they said. The alien nodded slowly. "In my world, colors like this meant birth, new stars, new beginnings." The medic smiled softly. "Maybe it means the same for you now." The alien didn't reply right away, but its eyes softened. For the first time in years, it felt something it hadn't known it could feel again: hope. That night, it dreamed. Not of the past or the dying ship, but of light. It dreamed of flying through stars beside the humans, of laughter echoing through the metal halls, of belonging somewhere again. But while peace grew inside the ship, something unexpected was happening outside. The humans' long-range sensors picked up faint readings, a distant signal following them. It was weak, almost like an echo. At first, they thought it was interference. But the pattern repeated, a rhythm that didn't match natural space noise. It was another ship. Unknown signature. Approaching slowly. The crew gathered in the control room, checking the readings. The alien, now walking with some strength, joined them. When it saw the pattern on the screen, its eyes widened. "That symbol," it whispered through the translator. "It is from my people." Everyone looked at each other. "Your people?" the captain asked. The alien nodded, voice trembling. "Yes. But if they come, they do not come for me. They come for what was lost." What was lost? The alien hesitated, looking down. Its hands tightened around the edge of the console. Something our ship carried. A core. A map of stars beyond this region. It was meant for peace, but others saw it as power. The room fell silent. The captain glanced at the crew, then back at the alien. "And now they're coming for it." "Yes," the alien said quietly. "They will think you took it." A heavy tension filled the air. Outside, the stars drifted slowly, but everything inside the ship felt still, like the universe itself was holding its breath. The humans didn't panic. They started preparing calmly, checking shields, rerouting power, ready to defend if needed. The alien watched them work, amazed. There was no fear in their faces, only focus and unity. "You are not afraid?" it asked. The captain shook their head. "Fear doesn't help. Doing something does." The alien looked away, whispering softly, "You're kind. You remind me of what we were, before the wars." Hours passed as the unknown ship drew closer. The human vessel maintained course, refusing to hide or flee. The alien stood near the bridge window, feeling its heartbeat quicken. It didn't want harm to come to its rescuers, not after all they had done. When the signal finally reached communication range, the alien turned to the humans. "Let me speak first, they might listen." The captain nodded. "Your voice, your choice." The alien stepped forward, activating the transmitter. The signal buzzed to life, a language of harmonic tones and pulsing frequencies. The alien spoke steadily, explaining what had happened, who had saved it, how the humans meant no harm. For a long time, there was no response. Then, at last, a faint reply came. The alien's expression softened. It recognized the voice, a familiar tone from its home world. It turned back to the humans, eyes shining. "They understand. They will not attack." Relief swept through the room like air after a long breath. The captain leaned back slightly, smiling. "Good. Then maybe this is a start." The alien nodded. "Yes, a start." As the second ship appeared through the window, a sleek silver craft gliding silently beside them, the alien felt tears gather in its eyes. Not of sadness, but of something deeper. Gratitude. It looked at the humans around. Their faces lit by the glow of starlight, and whispered, "You came for me when no one else would. I will not forget." The captain smiled faintly. Neither will we. And as the two ships drifted together in the endless sea of stars, something unspoken passed between them. A promise, a bridge between species built not from power, but from compassion. The alien had once believed its people were alone in the dark, but now it knew. Light had many shapes, and humanity's light was the kind that never turned away. For a long time, both ships drifted together in silence, one human, one alien. The stars stretched endlessly around them, glowing faintly like watching eyes. No one spoke much. It was a rare moment of peace in the vast, cold space that had taken so much from both sides. The alien stood by the wide viewing window on the human ship, watching as its people's vessel floated nearby. Its body was still weak, but the light in its eyes had changed. There was life there again. Hope. It whispered softly through the translator. For so long I thought no one would come. Now I see. I was wrong. The human captain stood beside it, hands behind their back, eyes fixed on the stars. No one deserves to be left alone, they said quietly. Not out here. Not anywhere. The alien turned slightly toward the captain. Your kind. You are different. When most see silence, you listen. When others see death, you search for life. The captain smiled faintly. Maybe we're just stubborn. The alien tilted its head as if trying to understand the word, then let out a soft sound that might have been a laugh. Stubborn, yes. A strange strength, but a good one. Over the next few hours, the two ships exchanged signals. Data streams filled with coordinates, languages, and histories. The aliens' people were cautious at first, unsure if this was a trap. But when they received the scans showing how the humans had saved their survivor, repaired what they could, and left a beacon at the wreck, the tone changed completely. A reply came, short, but full of meaning. We see your kindness. You will not be forgotten. When the humans read it aloud, the room went silent. No one said anything, but a quiet sense of pride filled every heart there. They hadn't just saved one life, they had changed something far greater. Soon after, preparations began for transfer. The aliens' people were sending a small craft to take their survivor home. The humans worked quickly, checking every system, ensuring the environment would be safe for travel. The alien, now stronger, walked slowly around the human ship one last time. Every detail fascinated it. The hum of the engines, the sound of laughter from the crew's quarters, the smell of brewed coffee in the mess hall. All these small things spoke of warmth, of life. It passed by the sleeping quarters and saw a small wall filled with pictures, old Earth photos. Families, mountains, oceans, sunsets. It stopped for a long moment, staring. The medic noticed and came closer. That's home, they said softly. Earth. The alien's voice was quiet. It is beautiful. You carry your home with you even here. The medic smiled. It's what keeps us human. The alien looked thoughtful. Then maybe I will carry this ship in my memory. It will be my home too, in a way. Later, as the two ships aligned for the transfer, the alien turned to the humans gathered in the corridor. You did not know me, it said slowly through the translator. Yet you came through the darkness. You gave me breath, warmth, and kindness. My people have stories of many civilizations, but none like yours. The captain stepped forward, shaking their head gently. We didn't do it for stories. We did it because it was right. The alien's eyes softened. And that, it said, is why you will be remembered. The crew watched as the airlock door opened, connecting the two ships. A faint blue light filled the passage. The alien paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. For a moment, no one moved. Then it raised one hand, a gesture it had learned from the humans. The captain smiled and raised a hand in return. Safe travels, they said softly. The alien stepped through the light and was gone. The door sealed slowly behind it. The human crew stood there quietly for a while. The hum of the engines filled the silence. It felt like the end of something important, and the beginning of something even bigger. When the alien ship finally pulled away, its silver hull caught the light of a nearby star, glowing softly. A single message flashed on the comm screen before the signal faded into the dark. We will tell them who you are. The words lingered on the monitor long after the ship disappeared. Days later, the human vessel continued its journey home. The stars looked the same, but everything felt different. The crew talked quietly among themselves about what had happened, about the rescue, the discovery, and the strange feeling that they had just witnessed the first thread of something larger than anyone could imagine. On the bridge, the captain watched the navigation screens deep in thought. The medic came in holding a small data pad. "The beacon's still transmitting," they said. "Signal's stable. Anyone who passes near that wreck will see it." "Good," the captain replied. "Let them know we don't forget." For a while, neither spoke. Then the medic said quietly, "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" The captain looked out at the stars. "Maybe, maybe not. But I think they'll remember us. And maybe one day when someone else is lost out there, they'll do the same." The medic smiled faintly. "A chain of kindness." "Exactly," the captain said. "And that's how civilizations survive." Weeks passed. The story of the rescue spread slowly through human channels. At first just a report filed by the crew, then whispers between colonies, then headlines. "Human ship rescues extraterrestrial survivor from abandoned vessel." Some people were skeptical. Others were inspired. But for many it reminded them of something simple and powerful. Why humanity had reached for the stars in the first place. Not to conquer, but to connect. The alien survivor returned safely to its world. And true to its word, it told the story. Not as a tale of machines or soldiers, but of people, of fragile beings made strong by compassion. On that distant world, children began to draw pictures of a blue and white ship in their classrooms. Elders spoke of the ones who came through silence. For the first time in generations, that world looked up at the stars not with fear, but with curiosity. Months later, a signal reached Earth. It was faint but clear. A recording of harmonic tones followed by a simple translation. "From the stars we were saved. To the stars we send peace." The message spread faster than light through human networks. People watched it on their screens, listened to the alien melody, and felt something shift inside them. For once, the galaxy didn't seem so distant. Back aboard the same human ship, now preparing for another deep space mission, the crew sat together in the mess hall. They talked quietly, eating, laughing. The stars outside were the same endless sea as before, but their meaning had changed. One of the engineers looked out the window and said softly, "Funny how saving one life can change everything." The captain, sitting nearby, nodded. "That's how it starts. Always with one," the medic smiled. "Do you think they'll come visit someday?" "Maybe," the captain said, glancing at the window. "But even if they don't, we already share something no distance can break." They all fell silent after that, letting the hum of the ship fill the air. It was a comforting sound, steady, alive. Outside, in the vast ocean of space, tiny lights shimmered faintly. Among them, somewhere far away, another light answered back, a signal not of distress, but of friendship. The galaxy was still full of dangers, mysteries, and darkness. But for the first time in a long while, the humans aboard that small ship felt certain that they weren't alone. Not in fear, but in hope. The alien who had once been left to die in silence had carried their story across the stars. It became a message to others. There is still kindness among the stars. There is still humanity. And so, when the human ship turned its engines toward the next unknown system, no one was afraid. The crew stood together, watching as the stars grew brighter ahead. In the endless night of space, they carried something invisible yet powerful, proof that compassion could travel farther than any signal, cross any distance, and survive any silence. They had gone out searching for a voice in the dark, and somehow by answering that voice they had become one themselves.